Okay, so today we're diving into the world of childbirth. And I know what you're thinking. Childbirth. Been there, done that. What's the big deal?
Right.
But trust me on this, folks. Even when we think we've got something like labor all figured out, there are always a few surprises waiting for us, right?
Definitely.
So get ready to deep dive into 7 important facts about giving birth. This came from a listener request. Shout out to you, Amy. But there's a twist.
Okay.
Our source for this deep dive isn't some fancy medical journal. It's an article from a website, swing2sleep.com.
Interesting.
Yeah, a baby hammock website. Apparently, they're not just about getting babies to sleep, but also about giving expectant mothers a healthy dose of reality.
I like it. Transparency.
Right. Honesty is the best policy, I always say. Anyway, the article came out on September 27th of 2022, so relatively recent, and it aims to paint a more, shall we say, realistic picture of what happens in the delivery room.
Okay, so setting the expectations straight.
Exactly. And they get right down to business, too. Their very first fact. The perineum.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no easing into it here. The article gets real about the possibility of perineal tearing during delivery. They even break down the different degrees of tearing, which, fair warning, might be a bit much for some. But hey, knowledge is power, right?
It definitely is. And the perineum, that area between the vagina and the anus, it undergoes a lot of stretching during childbirth. So tearing, sometimes unavoidable. The article does a good job of explaining that a bunch of things can influence whether or not it happens, like the baby size, the birthing position, even how long labor lasts. But the important thing for our listeners to remember is that there's pain management available, and most tears heal really well with stitches.
That's good to hear. And actually, speaking of things that can help, this is where I sat up and took notice. The article mentions perineal massage as a way to potentially reduce the severity of tearing during labor. Some even say it can help shorten labor time.
Interesting.
Right. Okay, swing2sleep.com. You've got my attention. Have you heard about this?
I have. Perineal massage is basically gently stretching the perineal tissues during pregnancy. And, there's actually a growing body of evidence to support its benefits. Studies have shown that it can potentially reduce the severity of tearing, which, as we talked about, can lead to a faster, smoother recovery. That makes sense. It's not a foolproof solution or anything like that, but it's definitely something worth bringing up with your healthcare provider. Get their take on it.
Exactly. Your doctor is always the best source for personalized advice. But now, get ready for this one, because this fact might make some listeners squirm a little. The article talks about, well, enemas. Yeah. Still surprisingly common in hospitals, even though it might seem a little, well,
A little old-fashioned.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, really?
Yeah.
We're still doing this? But the article does make it clear that while some hospitals might still consider it routine, others have moved away from this practice. So it seems like things are changing. But it's good to be prepared, just in case.
Really. Definitely. It's all about having all the information beforehand so you can make informed decisions about what you're comfortable with.
Absolutely. Advocating for yourself is key. Okay, let's move on to something I think is on every expectant parent's mind, that postpartum belly.
Right.
And kudos to swing2sleep.com. They don't sugarcoat this one bit. They come right out and say, and I quote, "Even if the baby has seen the light of day and the belly is therefore now empty, it has by no means disappeared."
It's true.
Thanks for the reality check.
It might seem obvious, but I think managing expectations is really important here.
Oh, absolutely.
Over 9 months, your body goes through this major transformation.
Right.
And the uterus in particular, it expands significantly to accommodate a growing baby. So naturally, it takes time for everything to go back to its normal size.
Yeah, it's not an overnight thing. It's like that saying, 9 months out, 9 months back. And speaking of those first few months, the article dives into 2 topics that I think a lot of new parents can relate to.
Yeah.
Breastfeeding and that emotional roller coaster that often comes with it.
And you're telling me.
Right.
Yeah, it's great they address this honestly. I mean, the article doesn't shy away from the fact that while breastfeeding is natural, it's not always easy. Those first few weeks, they can be rough.
Oh, yeah. There's this whole expectation, that it should be this blissful bonding experience. But the reality is it can be downright painful sometimes. Like, you're learning this new skill, your hormones are doing their own thing, and let's be real, babies can latch on with surprising strength.
All of that, plus the physical recovery from childbirth, and it's no wonder that a mother's emotional well-being can take a bit of a hit.
No kidding.
The article even gets into the baby blues, which, as they point out, is a really common experience for new mothers.
It's true. So many moms go through that. And they actually go a step further and talk about postpartum depression, too, which I think is so important to discuss openly, because it can be a serious condition.
Not just feeling a little down, it's something more than that.
Exactly. What I appreciate is that the article really emphasizes how important it is to get help if those feelings become overwhelming. Like, don't try to tough it out on your own. Reach out to someone.
Yeah. They normalize those experiences, remind everyone that they're not alone,
Yeah.
and that getting support, it's not a sign of weakness. It actually takes a lot of strength to ask for help.
Absolutely.
And this actually leads really well into their next point, which is all about, getting intimate again after having a baby.
Oh, time to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Because honestly, this is a topic that I think a lot of people are curious about, but no one really talks about. So spill the tea. How long until things are back to quote unquote normal? Whatever that means, by the way.
Great question. And the article is really reassuring about all of this. Basically, they explain that while things might feel a little different at first, the vagina is incredibly resilient.
That's good to know.
Right. It's designed to stretch, and for the most part, it will go back to its previous form and function over time. They also talk about postpartum flow, explaining that it's totally normal.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, it's just part of the healing process.
It's all about understanding what to expect, right?
Yeah.
Managing those expectations.
Exactly. And speaking of recovery, I was so happy to see that they highlighted pelvic floor exercises because that's something no one tells you about.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Right.
Like no one prepares you for that.
Right.
So important though.
It is. And those pelvic floor muscles, they play a key role in bladder control. And after childbirth, let's just say bladder control can be a little unpredictable.
You're telling me. Suddenly sneezing becomes an extreme sport. But okay, seriously, what can we actually do to strengthen those muscles?
Yeah.
The article mentions Kegel exercises, but is there anything else?
Yeah, Kegels are great. Definitely a good place to start. And as the article explains, it's all about contracting and releasing those pelvic floor muscles.
Right.
Kind of like you're trying to, stop peeing midstream.
Exactly.
But it's not all about Kegels.
Oh, okay.
No, there are actually a ton of exercises that can help strengthen that whole pelvic region.
So beyond the quick squeezes, what else should we be thinking about?
Well, anything that engages your core and lower body is going to help. So Pilates, yoga, even just going for a brisk walk can make a difference.
Okay, got it.
The key is consistency. It's not about quick fixes. It's about making those practices part of your routine. And of course, it's always a good idea to talk to a pelvic floor therapist, especially if you're dealing with any specific issues.
Yeah, makes sense.
They can create a program that's tailored to you.
Right, because everyone's different. Personalized advice is always the way to go. So after all this talk about the realities of childbirth, the tearing, the enemas, the whole pelvic floor recovery thing, how does the article wrap things up?
Well, in a slightly predictable turn of events, they end with a little plug for their product, the baby hammock.
Of course, had to get that in there.
Gotta love a good marketing moment.
For sure. For sure. But it's funny because they present it as this amazing solution for soothing your baby.
Right.
Which, don't get me wrong, a calm baby definitely helps with postpartum recovery.
100%.
When you're sleep deprived and your body feels like it went through a war zone, sometimes you just need a little peace and quiet.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Kind of. A little rest and relaxation. Never hurt anyone, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it is interesting how they tie it all back to their product.
Yeah, it all comes full circle. They address those real, often unspoken parts of childbirth, building trust with their audience. Right, and then they subtly position their product as this potential source of relief. Smart.
Sneaky, sneaky. But hey, marketing ploys aside, I actually think this article did a great job of highlighting how important it is to be informed, to be prepared for the realities of childbirth and postpartum recovery, both physically and mentally.
Totally. And what I really liked is how they didn't shy away from the less glamorous side of things.
Right.
It's like they say, it's not always pretty, but it's real.
That's life, I guess.
And they normalize the challenges, encourage people to talk to their doctors, their healthcare providers. Ultimately, it's about giving people the knowledge to advocate for their own well-being.
Well said. Knowledge is power, am I right? So what was your biggest takeaway from this whole deep dive? Anything surprise you?
That bit about perineal massage really stuck with me. It's not something you hear about every day, but the evidence is pretty convincing.
I know, right? It just goes to show that there's always something new to learn, even about something as, universal as childbirth. And on that note, we want to hear from you. What resonated with you in this deep dive? Head over to our social media and share your thoughts. Let's keep this conversation going.